First of all, music, as we well know, and has probably been said a bazillion times on your podcast already by different individuals, music is a universal language. It is a non-threatening language and form of communication. So for kiddos who are nonverbal or using communication with a different access point, music can also be that access point. Music can be the way that we can start to converse with each other. And there is a very clear understanding of what the expectation is in the music conversation, as opposed to if I don't understand the language and the words you're using, if I have a delayed response and I'm just understanding and interpreting the first sentence you said when you're on your last sentence, that can be very overwhelming and confusing. But in music, you can feel home. You can feel a place where I am existing and you are existing and we're coexisting together in the music and we're having a conversation.
Welcome to Cue the Magic Sing a New Song, a podcast that explores how music therapy can break barriers, spark connections, and change your child's life. I am your host, Angie Kopshai, a music therapy expert and the founder of the Global Music Therapy Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to utilizing music's therapeutic power to enhance the lives of kids and parents just like you on a global level. I always say that music therapy is this miraculous thing that's not miraculous at all. It's science, and you'll be blown away by how simple it is. I am here to help you learn the techniques you need to create a happier, healthier household. Let's tune in together and cue the magic. Hey everyone, welcome back to Cue the Magic Sing a New Song. I'm your host, Angie Kopshai, and this week's Try This tip is all about helping your child find calm using music. And it all ties back to something called Hebb's Law. Hebb is that guy who said neurons that fire together, wire together. And it's fancy talk, but basically it means the more your child hears a certain song paired with a relaxing touch or activity, the more that song becomes their personal calm button. Now, how exactly does this work with music therapy to help your child self-soothe? So think of Hebb's Law as your brain's way of building a best friend. Every time you sing that favorite calming song while gently squeezing their hands, rocking them, or doing some deep breathing, those neurons, tiny little messengers in their brain, are firing together. Over time, those neurons get closer, stronger, and more connected. So the next time your child hears that same song, their brain remembers the calming activity and says, hey, I feel safe and calm and relaxed. That's neural magic in action. So here's the trick. Keep repeating that pairing regularly. Sing that soothing melody during calm moments and do those gentle touches or sensory activities. Pretty soon, your child can use that song on their own as a self-soothing cue. They can just sing it to themselves or recall the connection, like their brain's own Calm app, and instantly start to feel better. You're basically giving their brain a shortcut to relaxation. Powerful, automatic, and all thanks to those well-wired neurons. So have fun with this. Sing, squeeze, and create those neural connections. Over time, your child will be able to self-soothe more easily, and you'll be amazed at how quickly they can tap into that calming connection. Thanks for listening, and as always, let us know how it goes for you, and we'll see you next week for another Try This tip. Welcome to Cue the Magic Sing a New Song. I'm your host, Angie Kopshai, and today I am so excited to be interviewing Esther Thane. Esther, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's really fun.
Can you tell us how you got started in music therapy?
Boy, that's a long story, and I'm sure everybody has their own origin story for this, and sometimes the threads may be very common and similar. I always was doing music growing up. It was the one thing that I could do, was the one thing that I was involved in extracurricularly. And when it came time to choosing a career, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. All I knew is what I didn't want to do. I knew I had to do something within music because that was what drove me as an individual. However, I didn't want to go into music performance. I didn't want to go into music education and teach the ukulele and the recorder. My sister is a concert pianist, so I had watched, and she's quite a bit older than me, so I had watched her evolve through her profession and the hours she spent practicing, etc. And I knew that that was not going to be my destiny. And it wasn't until I actually took a year off of university and was working as a nursing aide in Germany. My sister was living there at the same time, and she suggested, just a few months before I was going to move back to Canada, she suggested, what about music therapy? And I had no idea what it meant. I had no idea what the principal definition even of it was, but I knew that those two words put together made sense in my brain and in my body and in my heart. And so I really didn't do a lot of research. I really sat my bottom on the chair on that first day of the program and had no idea what it was. But I had learned to rely on my intuition and my gut, and it felt right. And I've never looked back.
Can you tell us a little bit more about where you're located and what you have going on for music therapy?
So we are located in Vancouver, up in Canada, and we've had our practice, ET Music Therapy, for almost 30 years. Next year will be our 30-year anniversary. We see primarily neurodiverse clients of all ages, from 2 years old to 50, 60 years old. That has been my primary specialization for all of those decades. I was always very, very interested and intrigued and captivated by the neurodiverse community, the population, and the connection between that community and music. But we do see all different clients as well, even stroke recovery, some seniors, uh, Alzheimer's. We also see mental health clients as well. We have 3 studios that we work out of, and as well, we do sessions with clients in schools, in group homes, in home settings, with other facilities, and online throughout the province.
So you have built a beautiful, gigantic team.
Yeah, I mean, it was an evolution, but it was something that was fundamental to how I wanted to evolve and help propel our profession forward. You know, back in the day, in the late 90s, there was not a lot of support. First of all, there was no such phrase as self-care. I don't even know if it existed back then. Maybe it did, and somebody can correct me, but I certainly was not. That was not in my paradigm. That was not in my zeitgeist. It was not in my uh, psychology to have self-care. So I worked a lot. It was, you know, I was part of that generation where you paid your dues, right? You there was a rite of passage. You had to work hard and pay your dues to get that experience, and I didn't have a support system. I didn't have anybody in my local community who were working with autistic kiddos at all. And there wasn't a lot of resources for that. So that's something I really wanted to create within my own company, is build more practitioners under one umbrella of a company, which wasn't really done yet here in Vancouver, so that I could create that support system for other therapists so that they didn't burn out, that they felt heard, that they felt listened to by like-minded practitioners who knew what they were going through. And I think that's really important for us to be able to build strength through having community.
What makes music therapy unique for your primary population you work with?
Oh, that's a loaded question. There are so many positive, wonderful gifts when you create music together with anybody who is neurodiverse. First of all, a lot of research has been done, really showing the connection between neurodiversity, autism in particular, and music. Very often, kiddos that I've certainly, of course, I'm only speaking also from my experience as well. It might be different for other people out there in different families, but in my experience, the kiddos who come to music therapy have an organic, intrinsic interest in music. They are fascinated by music more so, again, in my experience, than neurotypical kids. I mean, we know that music captivates all children and adolescents and adults, all of us alike. We all have a connection to music. But in particular, I felt throughout my experience with kiddos who were autistic that they were really fundamentally drawn to this particular medium over other mediums. It's not always the case, but um, certainly, I've had lots of clients. I mean, not lots, a good handful of clients that were not interested in music. I had a client once, a kiddo, who was more interested in the sound of the dial by turning to different radio stations and that static. He liked that sound more than music. And really the buck stopped with the Minecraft theme. That was it. And so, but fundamentally and more historically, kiddos with autism are really interested in music, and they're captivated in music for a lot of different reasons. First of all, music, as we well know, and has probably been said a bazillion times on your podcast already by different individuals, music is a universal language. It is a non-threatening language and form of communication. So for kiddos who are nonverbal or using communication with a different access point, music can also be that access point. Music can be the way that we can start to converse with each other. And there is a very clear understanding of what the expectation is in the music conversation, as opposed to if I don't understand the language and the words you're using, if I have a delayed response and I'm just understanding and interpreting the first sentence you said when you're on your last sentence, that can be very overwhelming and confusing. But in music, you can feel home. You can feel a place where I am existing and you are existing, and we're coexisting together in the music, and we're having a conversation. So, I think that in general, that is one huge reason why it's successful. Certainly, there's also been a lot of research showing that a lot of autistic kiddos often have really good either relative pitch or perfect pitch. And I know there's a couple of music therapists out there that have written about that whole concept, just that alone. So they are more successful. And we know that a principle in life for all of us as lifelong learners is that we are going to be motivated to engage in any activity if we are feeling successful in it. When Maria Montessori, my kids went through the Montessori program, and when Maria Montessori was observing kids in the natural environment and seeing how they learned and what their learning styles were, she found that kids will typically go through this same cycle over 45 minutes or an hour where they are doing something that they already are highly successful at. And that kind of helps prop up their ego and gives them the confidence to try something new. But eventually they get bored. They get bored with doing like, okay, I get this, I'm good at it, but it's not challenging enough, because I think our brains need to be challenged in life, just in general. We like that to an extent. And so then they would try something new that was challenging to them. And then they revert back to going back to what they can do very successfully. So I think because music can tend to be successful for a lot of autistic kids, they are engaged and motivated to be an active participant. And their memory recall can be so wild. I mean, it's amazing. And so, therefore, they can really recite back lyrics, songs, rhythms they can remember. I recall on more than a couple of occasions improvising with kids in the music therapy session and saying goodbye, sending them off on their way. And the next week they'd come back to the studio and open the door, want to do that same improvisation again, and would start playing or singing or beating out the actual improvisation. Of course, I'd had like a million improvs in the meantime with other clients. However, it's still stuck in their memory. They could remember the improvised melodies that we did a whole week ago. Like, it's so wild to me and so inspiring. So I think, those are just a few of the small reasons why there is that connection there, and why music, of course, is so captivating for this group of kiddos and people in general.
Just yesterday, I was working with a kiddo, and there is a book that we've already done for the past 4 sessions, and we had strategically planned to start a new book, but I still had the old book like in my bag, and he called out for it, and I was like, yes. And it's like, the parents are like, because they knew we had all planned, like we were going to do How Much Is That Doggy in the Window instead. And so instead we did Bear Hunt. Bear Hunt is the book. And we go through all the motions, and it takes like 10 minutes. It's a lot. We use every element we possibly can with that book. So we did it. But then after that, I did have the chance, like I had the new book out, and we got through the first like maybe 6 pages of that book. So I felt like it was still a really big success in that he got to do the thing he was so good at and he loved doing. And then we did get to move on to a more challenging thing next. And even though we didn't finish the new book, I'm certain that next week, even if we do Bear Hunt, we will get a little further with How Much Is That Doggy in the Window. But that success element that you're talking about, I feel like is so important. And it just feels easier to do that with music than with a lot of different modalities.
What a beautiful example. That's like a perfect example of that, and that's also a perfect example of how we as music therapists intrinsically work with our clients. What you did, allowing him to decide, I want to do this first. That flexibility, that ebb and flow that we create the space for in our sessions is also, I think, what helps propel any individual faster towards whatever their developmental journey is, because they feel in control of their learning. They feel in control and empowered. I know we use that word a lot in society nowadays, that empowerment, but it's true. They feel that empowerment. And when you feel invested in what you're doing and that you feel heard and listened to, and we're not just following this structure and it doesn't matter what you say or want, I think that interactive fundamental element of therapy is what makes it successful. And if you don't have that interactive, if you're not client led, if you're not willing to throw your schedule out the window or pause on what it was you wanted to accomplish and realize, if I just give it some time, we'll get there eventually. And he got there eventually. And he's going to be more receptive to trying new things in the future that you offer him, because he already felt like he had his voice being heard. So he's going to be also more willing to hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm hearing from this is that just to reiterate some of the things I love that you just said, music therapy is non-threatening, or music is non-threatening. I love that. I've never heard that before, and it makes total sense. And then we want to make sure that our clients are feeling joy. They're enjoying this. Otherwise, there's no point because they won't engage, right?
I think for me, a real light bulb went on years ago. And when I realized, especially with neurodiverse kiddos and autistic kiddos, that sensory component can be so pivotal and so important that I started thinking about more hedonistically, for lack of a better word. Um, how can I make them feel good? How can me as an individual, coupled with music, together create that pleasure? And sensory wise, when we're talking about that, it might be, offering deep pressure, offering something that is going to make that person feel calm, regulated. And I mean, music does that all the time, right? We've got percussion that resonates, that have deep vibrational input. We have music in a structure that autistic kiddos can feel safe within because music provides structure and a container. And then you couple that with sensory input, they're going to feel good. And when we get referred to and associated with feeling good, then just like you said, they're going to want to engage.
So, with all that being said, do you have any advice for parents wanting to use music therapy techniques at home with their kiddos and maybe, incorporating almost like priming their kiddos for that experience?
I'm a real firm believer that music is for everybody. And there are so many music therapy techniques that caregivers can do at home, in the moment, in context, when it arises, when they need it. It's no good to say, oh, I wish, my child is in crisis right now. I wish I was, with my music therapist. We need to empower parents to give them tools that they can use in those moments. And so coming back to what I was talking about before with sensory needs, simple things like hand rhythm games, songs, creating just a melody, or if you know your child's favorite song, if they love Katy Perry and they want to sing something over and over again, or that puts them at ease or puts them in their happy place and can maybe abruptly shift or interrupt whatever that behavior or crisis is at that time and substitute it with something that's going to help them feel good. We can apply that by just singing with the kiddo. You can squeeze their hands, you can kind of interlock fingers and do a pulse. Again, create a container with the music that child can live within to help regulate, and sing that song or that melody. If you don't know the words, just, sing the melody and beat and squeeze at the same time as you're singing the different lyrics, just to create that good feeling, that feedback, that deep pressure. That might be an effective thing to do at home.
Are there any ways that parents can make their environment, their home environment, more musically rich besides all the awesomeness that you just mentioned?
Well, I think there's been a lot of talk lately about things like playlists and curating a playlist with your kiddo, or knowing your kiddo that you can create that playlist, call it a feel good playlist. and it's all of their favorite songs or their favorite sounds. It doesn't even need to be only music. It could be if they like a certain instrument or they like a certain sound they hear on the street, being able to grab a recording of that. But something where it's an entirely curated playlist just for them that they feel they can go to when they are feeling like they need a self-inflicted timeout, right? Like where they need to take a step back and say, I got to step off here for 10 minutes. I need to calm down and relax. So I think playlists are a great way to do that. If your child shows any interest in any instrument, being able to, just purchase something, and you don't, it doesn't need to break the bank. There's tons of instruments on Facebook Marketplace to just allow a child to explore with. We have at our company at ET Music Therapy, we have a lot of families when they first reach out for services, they will say, my child showed an interest in music. So I bought him a toy piano, or I bought him a little mini drum kit, and he goes on it, and it was great at first, but now we don't know what to do. And often that next kind of logical step is music therapy. So allowing your child to kind of explore on their own. And again, no expectations, just give them the instrument, allow them to explore on their own time, especially if they have auditory defensiveness. They need to feel that control and predictability for their brains that they're making the music, and that will help ease their auditory defensiveness over time as well. So those are some things I could suggest. Certainly as well, we have, which would be very beneficial, our relaxation package. It's called Rooted in Music, and it can be downloaded off of our website, and it comes with 4 different recordings. They're all the same recording, but different versions of those recordings. And one thing that I researched many, many years ago is I started noticing that autistic kiddos often, not always, but often respond more to the sung voice than the spoken voice. I always think of back in the day, Charlie Brown, if you recall, when any adults spoke during a Charlie Brown episode, all they heard was wah, 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 right? So they didn't actually hear the word. So that often I find can be the case with autistic kiddos, that the information is not going in at a deep enough level. If you sing the directives, you're almost a little like the Pied Piper, and they will adhere or listen and engage and follow those directives. So the whole relaxation is a vocally led relaxation. So it's very unique in that way, with a beautiful piano melody underneath that is consistent. And there are 4 versions, as I mentioned before. One that's just 5 minutes long. So if you just need to be able to throw that on the earbuds in the back of the car, in the car seat when we're transitioning to another activity, or we just need a quick 5-minute, you've got that there. There's a 10-minute version. There's a 20-minute version for self-regulation, coming down in our arousal level, if that's what we need at that time, and then transitioning to another activity. So it transitions the kiddo out of that relaxed state and prepares them. And it's very deliberately done with how the music is selected and created to create that subtle transition that isn't jarring for the child who has just relaxed for 20 minutes and now, oh, I got to go somewhere else. And I think that was because I created that version because I was researching and refining this method when I was working in a school district. And people thought I was crazy creating a relaxation in the school environment. How can you ask kids to relax? And I'd bring pillows and blankets and get the kids to lie down with their paras or their aides so that they bonded with them too. This is not an opportunity for you to have to be the facilitator. I'm taking care of that job. You lie down with your child. And we somehow worked around all those recess bells and all all of those things. But I think that kind of triggered my creativity to create a version to help transition to another environment, to a different class, to I've got to go pick somebody up from school, my baby brother, etc., or I've got to go out for supper, whatever that is. That might be a challenging activity. And then there's a 20-minute version for falling asleep. So this, of course, is key for parents to be able to do at home. We don't want the kiddos to fall asleep in a therapy session, so we don't use that version within that environment, but it's fantastic for parents and caregivers that want to create a bedtime ritual and have that music there where they can lie down with the child in the bed together. Again, it's a beautiful bonding moment. Parents need relaxation and self-regulation and self-care too. Again, kind of coming back to that self-care point. And it's a really beautiful experience when you can close the curtains and the blinds, turn off your phones, prepare yourself, brush your teeth, get ready to go through the relaxation for the sole purpose of falling asleep. So that's another resource that I would recommend for caregivers to check out.
That sounds like an amazing resource that's so well thought out and good for so many different experiences in life. So, like, oh, I love it. That's great.
Well, yeah, and I think, when you say that, it makes me want to also mention that these relaxations can be used just for the caregivers. They don't need to use it with their child. So this is about self-care for the caregiver, not just parents, grandparents, siblings, anybody who is in that immediate family environment with the autistic kiddo can benefit from these relaxations. They're not composed in child's music kind of feel. They're a little bit more sophisticated, kind of grown-up music. And so it's something that you absolutely can use for self-care yourself.
Hey everyone, we have big news. The Global Music Therapy Project has finally been approved to host the ultimate PDX bingo game show. Think bingo meets game show madness with a late night twist. Win cash, score amazing prizes, and support a great cause. The proceeds go towards expanding the reach of the Global Music Therapy Project and making a real difference in the lives of children and families around the world, all while having a great time. Join our mailing list at pdxbingo.com to be the first to know when tickets drop. We can't wait to see you there. Can we talk about transitions for a minute? I feel like music therapy with transitions is amazing. Can you share any examples of ways that you use music for transitions?
Well, again, taking something that is, I think the principle of music therapy is that we use client preferred music. So again, that becomes like the carrot in front of the horse. If a child has a preferred song that makes them feel good, if we're having issues with transitions, that's the time to play the song. That's the time to sing the song with the child. We don't need recorded devices. A parent needs to feel confident that everybody has a voice and nobody's judging your voice. And I think maybe it happens less often than when I grew up, but when I grew up back in the 70s and 80s in school choirs, if you sang off tune, the choir director would say, just mouth the words. And that is so debilitating to a person's confidence and not even their confidence, but their fundamental identity of who they are. Your voice is your most intimate, vulnerable essence of who you are. And to be told to shut that down, that old truth stays with a lot of people for many years, all through their adulthood. Ironically, our voices change, especially if you're a boy, right? Our voices change in puberty. So those truths do not stay true all the time. But I think a lot of people have had that in their life. Oh, I don't have a good voice. I can't sing. And having your own child and using your voice is the most perfect opportunity to do so, because that child has been hearing and listening to your voice since they were in utero 4 months. It's the first complete sensory system that is developed completely in the fetus, is the auditory system. Having said that, I've had a lot of parents who say, I cannot sing. As soon as I sing to my child, they say, stop it. I don't want to hear you sing. So that happens too, where a lot of autistic kiddos don't want you to sing, but it's not necessarily your voice only. So as a parent or caregiver, you can't take that personally. Often with kiddos who don't want you to sing, they don't want the music therapist to sing either. They don't want anyone to sing or make music. It might be too overwhelming for them. It might be too much input. They can only handle their own musical input. So, that does happen. And certainly there are cases like that of kiddos who don't want to hear your voice. But typically you can feel free to use your voice. Sing that song, that favorite preferred song in the car to help with the transition. You're going to help distract the child, because this is what we do. We distract ourselves all the time, really. And so that's okay. That's what we do as human beings. I worked out today and was riding on my stationary bike. Well, I needed to listen to music. I have to distract myself from the pain of this is not very fun, right? So music is a distraction. Music helps warp the perception of time. So if somebody's having difficulties with transition, music can help warp that perception and lead them out of that transition earlier. Certainly, transitions, we deal with them in many different ways as music therapists, right? Like if a child won't come into the studio, we often take the music to them and do the music in the car and slowly work our way to the studio. Walk with the music, walk with the drum, play and sing as we're moving. So we're using music as this companion to help a child transition, fundamentally as a distraction and also as sensory input to override whatever it is the child is experiencing in the moment. And, it typically has a fundamentally a physiological component to it.
Yeah. So I say a lot, make your life a musical is what I try to preach to parents. And what you're saying about someone at some point in second grade or seventh grade saying that they were tone deaf or they had a terrible voice, it does do a lot of damage. And I feel like a lot of times I'm like, first of all, it's not about what your voice sounds like, right? It does not need to be beautiful. But to elaborate upon what you're saying about sometimes kids don't want, I get that. I get stop singing. They tell me to stop. And I feel like there are a lot of reasons why that is happening. And I sometimes will just take it down a notch and maybe I'm just humming instead or something. But I feel like even if a parent hears stop singing, it means like in that moment, and it could be for a million different reasons, but don't stop trying and maybe just experiment with singing softer or humming or who knows. But I would say definitely like don't stop trying, right?
Don't stop trying. That is key, Angie, for sure. Like you said, every scenario, every situation can have a million different variables in that moment of why they need something or don't need something. It doesn't mean that it's consistent across the board in every scenario. I think it's about connecting to your child and connecting with them in a different language other than words. And there are many ways to connect and many ways to communicate with children. It doesn't need to only be through language.
I feel like reminding parents sometimes that we I struggle with transitions personally. I struggle with sensory overload. If I'm having a great conversation with someone at a table full of 20 people and who are all having their own conversations, it doesn't take long for me to feel exhausted and feel like I just want to grab that person and be like, can we go talk somewhere else? Because I can barely hear you. And I'm hearing like little trickles of conversations from other people that are like interesting to me or distracting. But I feel like we experience as adults a lot of these same things that we are seeing our kiddos experience.
Yeah, I think that's what helps us have empathy for their situation. You know, Glenn Gould, he was a famous Canadian pianist who was made infamous through his interpretations of Bach music. And he used to go into this cafe where he lived, and he would sit in the middle of the cafe, and he tried to train himself to see how many conversations he could truly listen to simultaneously. And you know, for the most part, we can listen to two. Like when you were saying that about being engaged in a conversation, but there's somebody beside you who also has a very interesting conversation, you can kind of somewhat go between the two, right? You can stay engaged in your primary conversation, but you can still get, you know, you're within earshot of what's going on. But could you imagine like doing three and trying to balance three different conversations simultaneously? And why I bring that up is just because I think it's kind of funny and interesting. But we tend to be able to do almost two, but we get overwhelmed very easily too. I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I feel that if I go to like IKEA after an IKEA trip, I'm like, I just got to get home. I need to veg. I need to, you know, decompress from all the noise, or going to, you know, an amusement park or Disneyland or whatever, where we feel overwhelmed and overstimulated. But for, you know, for the autistic kiddo, they're like Glenn Gould sitting in the middle of that cafe, and every single conversation is coming in at the same volume, at the same intensity as the busboy who is taking the dishes in the back room far away from where you're sitting, and it feels like those dishes are, you know, being maneuvered around right beside your ears. So when all the stimulus is coming in at the same time, it's super easy to get overwhelmed. We get overwhelmed, and the longer we have social media and so much input all the time, you know, neurotypical people can get overwhelmed. So can you imagine how difficult it can be? They're really keeping themselves together when you're neurodiverse and you have those auditory sensitivities, or the gatekeeper in your brain is not saying, okay, this is the prime conversation, let's listen to this, let's dampen and reduce the volume of everything else going around in your environment so that you can focus on that conversation. You know, that their gatekeepers don't always work the same way. And um, it mustn't be fun. You know, it's a whole different learning skill set to be able to maneuver through society, maneuver through the mall, through the school hallways, through acoustic places and gymnasiums, and when you're dealing with that sensory overload. And I think we're getting a lot of it more nowadays than we ever have.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought up Glenn Gould. I did not know that particular fact, and it makes me love him even more. What I know is that he was fantastic at interpreting Bach, but you could hear him singing or humming in a lot of those recordings. And the first time, like, I was like, like kind of almost making fun of him. And then I was like, wait, like, this is brilliant, and maybe he's onto something. So now to hear that, you know, what you just told me, I'm like, this guy worked really hard to hone in on his skills, and he was fantastic. And I feel like he almost used, it's not quite a coping mechanism, but he used something that was Not typical. I mean, singing along to a recording is not something you hear very often. But in the end, his interpretation, his recordings were so powerful. And I am in awe of what he did. And so that's a great story and a great example of working really hard and stepping outside the box and doing whatever you need to do. In this case, singing along as you're playing and just making it that much better.
Well, and the singing along, it's so funny because there's really two different camps of people, right? There's people that just, it drives them crazy to hear him humming in the background. And I have to say, I think the first couple of times I listened to the first, the original recordings from the 50s, it really, it irritated me too. But now I couldn't imagine listening to, the Goldberg variations without hearing him hum, because to me, when I hear that humming, I feel like I'm in the room with him. It doesn't feel sterile. It feels real and it feels feeling. And the moments that he's humming are the moments that he's getting very excited in the music, which kind of cues you as the listener to do the same. And, it's again a perfect example of we can't it's hard not to respond to music as human beings. It's hard not to tap your foot when you're at a concert, even like a concert that's supposed to be more of a sit down professional. I've got to, maintain my etiquette. But, why do we move when we hear music? Why do we bop our heads? Why do we tap our knees? Why do we tap our feet? Why do we hum along to music when we're playing the music? Because we can't help it. It draws you in. Music draws you in to be part of that song, that moment in time. And so it draws in autistic kids too. And whenever you're drawn into something, you're going to get so much more out of it. We always say this phrase at ET Music Therapy. It's a child or any individual is going to integrate skills at a deeper level when it comes from a place of inner motivation and curiosity. I was never curious about math. Therefore, I was never engaged and didn't do very well in math. It didn't interest me. When things interest you and you're successful, that makes you want to come back for more.
Yes. So we as humans, we entrain to music within seconds. And then going back to Glenn Gould one more time, I feel like he provided us with an opportunity for an extra connection. But like this personal level, since he's singing along to it, feeling like we're right there in the room. What is your favorite thing about being a music therapist?
The unknown of every day, the unknown of every session, the unknown of every kiddo that walks through that studio door. Even if you do know them, what the unknown of the music we're going to create, the unknown of what's going to come out of that session, the unknown of a parent emailing you after and saying, oh my gosh, that was an amazing session. So and so has been doing that at home and using it throughout the week. It's all the unknowns, it's not a regular 9 to 5 job, even if you do have 9 to 5 hours as a music therapist. You never know what's going to happen. And for me, that's why I've always been drawn to the autistic community, is because of the unknown. We all know and have heard it a million times, every autistic, you met one, you've only met one, right? Everybody is different. I mean, this is true about all of us in life, not just autistic individuals. We can't, none of us can be fit into a box and labeled. And you might have worked with somebody with anxiety a million times, and then somebody else comes through your door with anxiety and looks totally different. And somebody's autism looks totally different from the next person. And what works may work with one person and doesn't work with another. So uh, it's that unknown. And for some people, that's unsettling. People, then everybody's got to follow their bliss. Everybody's got to choose a career and a path that works for them. There are other communities you can work with as a music therapist that have less of those unknowns. And you've got to know your own personality type and what works for you. I like the challenges. They're hard, but I like them. I like that unknown. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
I love it. And I feel like as music therapists, we are trained to be flexible. And there are times when me personally, I work really hard on a session plan. I put a lot of thought and energy into it. And then I show up and I got to throw it out the window, right? And in the end, if we can celebrate that and be like, okay, this is a chance for us to get creative on a different level, and then expand that concept to parents in everyday life. Like there will be unknowns, there will be hiccups, there will be things that come up that cause you to pivot and throw your plan out the window. But it's also your opportunity to get creative.
Yeah, get creative and rely on your creativity. And, I think for me, it was also at a point where I realized that you have to, after a certain number of years of experience and kind of, knowing what's going to happen, but not really knowing what's going to happen, and being okay with not knowing what's going to happen, and going down the rabbit hole with a child if they really want to go down that rabbit hole, because you can get you both back out of that rabbit hole. And knowing that it's like this Jedi power, right? Like, this is going to work. I'm going to help you in your transition. I'm going to help you here. Knowing that your intention is over half of the equation. And being secure, even if it won't work, sometimes it doesn't, but being secure in the belief that this is going to work. What I'm going to do right now is going to work right now. And that, I think, is the formula to success when you're wanting to connect or engage with anybody in life, is just feeling like this is going to work, and that I can be flexible. And as a parent, you've got to be, I mean, come on, as parents, it's the most flexible job in the world, or you have to be the most flexible. You're constantly having to throw out the window what you want to do. But knowing that you can get you and your child back out from that rabbit hole because you've got the tools to do so, you can indulge them to go down that rabbit hole a little bit.
Do you work with other team members or other types of therapists?
Yes, all the time. We bring in um, speech therapists, OTs, counselors, um, other people who are neurodiverse themselves, and will do in services. We're always open for sure to um, communicating, being at IEP meetings, being in team meetings, having our voice being heard at the table when you're working with a whole bunch of people on a kiddo's plan team. I think, as I always say, music therapists, we don't even have really any of our own goals. We lift them from everyone else, right? We lift communication goals from speech paths. We lift sensory and motor praxis goals from OT. We lift them, but we still need to collaborate with them. They are the experts in their field, but all of the goals that you're working on with a child in development, whether it is language or praxis or impulse control or behavior issues, any goals a behavior consultant have, we all can enhance the success of that and practice it in the music therapy environment. So I think it's so difficult in music therapy to convey what we do the best, because everything that we do in music is targeting so many different goals simultaneously. When we beat the drum, we're working on eye-hand coordination. We're working on self-expression. We're working on crossing the midline, motor praxis. We're working on auditory discrimination. Everything is being simultaneously worked on. So it's really hard to put your finger on where the magic, your podcast is called Cue the Magic. And it's like, but where's the magic? That magic is it's mischievous. It moves around here and there. What is the magic within music? Music is magical, and human beings bring that magic to life.
While working with an entire team and lifting goals, as you said, I feel like one of the gifts music therapists can potentially provide are creative elements to make those goals more fun and more engaging, more motivating.
Yeah, I think, fundamentally, especially if you're working with children in the music therapy capacity, we tend to target all those goals through activities, through different songs, through different fun games that have visual reinforcers, picture cards, movement, different props. So we're accessing all those goals through having fun.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Tell us more about how we can find you. What are the online resources you use the most?
You can find us at our website, etmusictherapy.com. There's a landing page there for Rooted in Music, the relaxation package that can be downloaded. And you can also, if you're a music therapist, you can find us at mundopato.com with UnitusTI. Our music therapy curriculum program that we use in my company is hosted there for other like-minded music therapists and specialists to use with their kiddos that they're working with.
Do you have any final words of advice for parents?
Meet your child in the music.
And that wraps up our conversation with Esther Thane. Thank you, Esther, for sharing your insight and experiences. If you're interested in exploring her relaxation resources further, be sure to check out her relaxation package, Rooted in Music. You can find the link in the show notes, and it's definitely worth a look if you're interested in incorporating these calming techniques at home. And now, to help you and your little ones relax and unwind even more effectively, here's the relaxation song from our album, Songs for Kids on the Autism Spectrum. I invite and encourage you to sing along with the song. It's a wonderful way to immediately entrain your body and create a sense of calm more quickly. So find a comfortable spot with your kiddos, breathe deeply, and relax together.